anime before, they seem to combine so many genres together and combine them well, they did.
Everyone might hate me about this, but
Ah,
I really didn't watch. Again, getting too deep here. Hello there. You're tuning in to the NerdyFans Podcast, the place for binge watchers and anime nerds that are young at heart. My name is Glee.
and I'm Ray, and welcome to the NerdyFans Podcast. Glee, we have a great episode today. We're going to be talking about some classic anime. Could you explain further for our nerdy fans what they expect on this episode regarding that?
Yes, Ray. So this is quite exciting for us and very nostalgic because, as you know, we are millennials and
Yep.
we wanted to talk about the animes that have shaped our childhood and just talking about nostalgia, right? So we wanted to showcase on this episode our favorite animes back in the day and also the animes that shape us. So Ray, shall we start with yours and maybe I can chime in as well on what I think?
Oh, definitely. So, it comes to no surprise to a lot of our nerdy fans, especially those who have listened to me talk about some of my favorite animes from years gone by, that Akazukin Chacha would definitely be mentioned. So this anime is what really got me into the anime genre, I would say. I remember as a kid, 11, 10-year-old kid in grade school, I looked forward to every episode on Cartoon Network to watch Akazukin Chacha. It was just funny, the characters were awesome. And I will admit that the Holy Princess there was my first anime crush, I would say, just being honest there. And it's really what got me into, looking more into the genre, looking for that buzz. And I believe I mentioned it in an episode before, whether here or Gleeful Talk Show, that my cousin, remember, fellow nerdy fans, this was a time before Crunchyroll and whatnot, where you had to wait for each episode every week or every day. My cousin waking me up at 7 in the morning during our summer vacation to let me know that Akazukin Chacha was on. And these are just some of the amazing experiences. And don't get me wrong, I love what we have now. I love having anime on the go. But these memories are for keeps. And it's something that I treasure very dearly. What about you, Glee? What anime gives you that kind of vibe?
Well, first and foremost, you mentioned something about the feeling of waiting, and I do agree on that. It's just different. It hits differently when you have to wait for another week or
Yep.
so just to see that favorite episode, and it's kind of like part of your day to day, or not day to day, or let's say weekly routine,
Yep. Yep.
right? And I remember also this wasn't in the 90s. Maybe we'll do another episode about 90s and 2000 anime. But one
Yep.
of the animes before that I've watched in the 2000s, I watch every weekend and that also formed as part of my weekend. However,
Yep.
to circle back onto the anime that really got you into anime, I would have to say for myself, it's actually Cedie, the Little Prince, or Cedie ang Munting Prinsipe in Filipino. So it was in ABS-CBN before, and it was in Tagalog actually. And at that point in time, I was so young, I didn't know about anime. So I couldn't differentiate what anime is versus cartoons, right? Because
Exactly.
now there is really a technical difference
There is a technical
between
difference.
them, and us otakus would always quick to correct if it's an anime or a cartoon. I had
Oh,
to say.
absolutely.
But for those who don't know about Sadi, the Little Prince, it is based on an 1886 children's novel of the same
Mm.
name by English playwright and author Francis Hudson Burnett. So this is a story where the main character, which is our little prince, is from America, and he finds out that he is actually the sole heir to a British earldom and leaves New York City to take up the residence in the ancestral castle. And then that's where the challenges that is shown. But it's interesting because that is such a very dramatic anime for some reason, but it's shown for kids. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember this anime, Ray.
Actually, I do remember that anime. I can no longer remember most of the stories. But here's the strange thing, my fellow nerdy fans. I actually also followed that anime when it was shown in ABS-CBN. Yes, it was in Tagalog, and I know I'm horrid with formal Tagalog, but there was just something about that cartoon that made me want to watch. Again, I can no longer remember much of the story. I just remember loving it, and I also remember, and this is how famous this anime was back in the day. There was actually a live Tagalog adaptation of Cedie, I recall, right? So it was one of those animes that I would say helped define the early 90s genre for Filipinos. Also, I believe there were other anime like Sarah, the
Yes,
princess as well.
the Sarah,
Yep.
which is also from an anime and then adapted
Mm.
to a Filipino
Filipino
show
film,
as well.
and if I'm not mistaken, even an American film, if
Oh,
if I recall correctly. And that's why when Filipinos call somebody a Miss Minchin, everybody understands that that's actually negative because you're describing somebody who's uptight and villainous at the same
and
time.
actually that's so funny because there was a time before that it was Halloween, and my husband was like looking at like a list of Filipino monsters, and Miss Minchin is there.
Well, might not be the conventional aswang or capre for you, but definitely Miss Minchin is a monster if you've seen the anime or actually familiar with the story. So props to that. She is a monster, and I accept that wholeheartedly.
And I'm wondering about our fellow nerdy fans whether they've also watched this anime on their country. But also going back, Ray, to Akazukin Chacha,
Mm.
I really like Akazukin Chacha as
Mm.
well. It just, unlike you, it didn't define my love for anime
Yep.
because I think Sadi was a bit earlier, I think.
Oh, significantly earlier. I know because I cannot remember much of the episodes, and I know that it was before I entered grade school. My fellow nerdy fans, I'm pretty sure I was definitely in nursery and kindergarten when I was watching that. So yes, I am that old, and nothing wrong with that. I'd like to think I'm happily aging. Could be a lot healthier, but still, I'm happily aging on that part. Look, this anime, I'm not sure if you think that it aged well, but give it a try. Have a look at it. See what your soon to be ancient uncles used to like back in the day, all right?
And I have to say also that Cedie also helped shape my drawing, how I draw.
Ah,
So I like drawing back in the day. If I wasn't in the corporate world, I'd say I could have maybe pursued like fine arts. But so yeah, I that was the anime that shaped how I draw as well. And really the song on that anime still lingers in my head. Like I can still remember the song.
yep. And if I recall correctly, I could be wrong, but Cedie's opening song in ABS-CBN might have been in Tagalog, wasn't it? They made one.
Well, I don't know, but it was, I think, Japanese because I remember
Yep. Yep.
but I can't understand the words. That's how I remember it.
Possibly. I remember the tune. It blared out when I was younger from those TVs, my fellow nerdy fans, wherein it's not even flat screen, it's a tube,
Yeah.
basically with antennas on top. Those are the kinds of TVs we watch Sadi on, right? Speaking of old anime, Glee, in terms of the classics, I don't know if you're familiar with Robotech. Have you watched that?
No, I think not really. Can you
You know,
tell us what it is about, Ray? Roughly.
all right. So before I even knew about Gundam, and mind you, Gundam predates this anime, I believe. I knew Robotech first. So it's still about mechs, robots. It's a space anime wherein humans both try to defend against aliens and try to approach them diplomatically. It is perhaps my first anime wherein I wanted a certain pair of characters to end up together. Probably I don't champion them as much as another anime that I'm going to talk about later on in this episode. But Robotech was the anime that I would say, and for those of you who remember, for me it's Rick Hunter and Lisa Hayes forever, right? So initially this was an anime where the main character was dating another girl, And I think consciously, myself and my sister were saying, he's too good for her. He deserves the other girl.
So
So
is it a romance or like a action and romance kind of thing?
action, romance, sci-fi. Anime before, they seem to combine so many genres together and combine them well, they did. And this was the kind of stories that I look forward to. I love seeing the love develop between him and finally Lisa, and also the amazing space battles. I remember loving how their space headquarters transformed into a giant robot to fight the aliens. And you knew when it did that, the good guys were winning, right? So this was it. It was the first time, again, I suppose my really first time seeing anime mecha. It was also the first time I rooted for or wanted a certain couple to end up together. And just to give you a background on that, the couple that I was rooting, or the girl I was rooting for, was more of the, I wouldn't say uptight, but refined, military staff personnel, kind-hearted and all that. And her opponent was the lively stage singer. So even then, I prefer the corporate lifestyle over the singing artist. Man, that speaks a lot about me. But that was an amazing anime. And I don't know about you, Glee. What anime in the past that also gave you those kinds of vibes, having multiple genre that seems to meld sweetly together? And you're focused on rooting for something, maybe like that, a couple or a certain cause.
I'm not entirely sure if this would fit the bill, but similarly to Robotech, as you mentioned, I really like Gundam Seed. There's a lot of Gundam variations, right, that
Oh
I couldn't
yeah.
even count now. But there was one variation that I really liked. And again, there's also this like a similar character that like the woman and the
Yep.
man, the captain, etc. But I can't remember exactly whether there was like a third person there. So I couldn't find on my list about a similar like dynamics at the
Yep.
moment.
Oh,
I like Gundam Seed as well. I'm not even sure whether I think it is a 2000s version, this Gundam Seed. It
yep.
might be a 2000s version, but there is like an earlier version, so we
Yeah.
might scrap that off. But there is, to segue a little bit, because you mentioned something about romance and all. I don't know if you heard about two animes called Marmalade Boy and Hana Yoridango.
Something tells me that, of course, I haven't. I might have heard somebody mention that, especially that second one, Hara.
Hana Yoridango. That's
Yep.
Boys Over Flowers, actually. That is the anime or slash manga that is based the Meteor Garden on,
Mm,
the
that's why it
Taiwanese.
sounds familiar. Because, of course, as you know, my fellow nerdy fans, girls of my generation was really in love with Meteor Garden when it came out. For the life of me, I couldn't understand why. But I'm not a girl, so it's not for me to judge. They were so big that you would have lived under a rock if you don't know who these guys are. So that's probably why Boys Over Flowers ring a bell, because I know it's been mentioned by the myriad of fans that I do try to ignore during that time. But hey, look, I I am curious now, Glee. Is Meteor Garden, because you said it's based off Boys Over Flowers, how faithful is Meteor Garden to Boys Over Flowers?
The Taiwanese version, they did have their own spin on it, but there is also a
Mm.
Japanese live action version of it, which is much more faithful to the, of
Ah.
course, the anime. But to to be clear, I actually haven't watched the Hana Yoridango anime.
Yep.
But I've watched both the Japanese and, of course, the Taiwanese versions. So
Mm.
I watched the Taiwanese version first and then the Japanese version. But yeah, so it just reminded me because of the love story aspect that you kind
Mm.
of mentioned. And the Marmalade Boy is also an anime and then adapted to live action by the Taiwanese. For some reason at that time, if you remember it, there were
Yep.
a lot of Taiwanese dramas that came in the Philippines.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I recall quite clearly that it wasn't just the Taiwanese. I think there was something that came after Meteor Garden that became its next big, sort of its successor. And
Mm.
then it slowly died out. the Japanese kind of showed themselves with J-pop before somehow and some way the Koreans just took over everything.
Yeah.
That yep, that's a little bit of history for you. And if you want to go really deeper, and it might not be related to anime, before the Chinese, the Taiwanese came into the picture, a lot of Filipino women love their Spanish or Mexican Latino telenovelas. Let me
Yeah.
tell you, it was just nuts at that time, really. I had to navigate very carefully in those kinds of spaces.
And I have to say that those Mexican telenovelas also shaped the
Mm,
Filipino telenovelas, I had to say,
yep,
right?
absolutely. In fact, a bunch of our telenovelas are based directly from their original versions in Mexico
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
wherever in Latin America. And I suppose with those, and it evolved again, that's where you can see where Filipinos love their romance, I suppose, love their drama. You see that in the Taiwanese stuff. You see that in the Korean stuff that most of our fellow Filipinos favor. Maybe even and I would say even in our anime, we love a good story. As I would say, right? Which is why I like talking about my next
I
favorite
have
anime,
I
which
have
is
a feeling which one it is, but
Fushigi Yuugi. I'm not going to deny that. Now that is the anime that, it's the first anime I would say, the couple love story plus action that I really followed. Yes, Akazukin Chacha is the anime that sits on my heart's throne, I would say, to put it poetically. But Fushigi Yugi is something that is really that action, that romance anime, I would say that I really wanted to look and finish. You could say it's a slight evolution or a step up from the Disney Channel stuff that I was so used to. It was a natural step up, right? And to this day, I am happy for Miyaka and Tamahome, or rather Takasikonami, as he is now known in the latest version, for ending up together and finishing their story. I do wish they continue more about it. I know there are some manga about, another, sort of a spin off to Fushigi Yugi. But man, the way it ended, even if you want more, it ended right. What about you, Glee? What are your thoughts on Fushigi Yugi?
okay, everyone might hate me about this, but
Ah,
I really didn't watch Fushigi Yugi. For some reason, I was missing in action during those times. Maybe I was watching the telenovelas at that time. I can't remember. But there is a similar anime that I was with Fushigi Yugi, which is Ayashi no Ceres.
mm,
That's the one that I was following. It might have come in later. But you think so, right? It's around
yeah.
2000s.
I think it did come slightly later. I remember. Here's the funny bit, my fellow nerdy fans. I remember Ayashino Ceres. I followed Ayashino Ceres. I remember it with it being the same time as Boys B were shown in AXN, the channel that I watch it on.
I think,
But
yeah,
for
it's
the
on the
yeah,
AXN. Yeah.
yeah. But for the life of me, my fellow nerdy fans, I could barely remember a single episode except that she had blue hair.
I can't even remember she had blue hair. But I remember also same, like I don't remember exactly each episode, but it helped me remember like just the feeling of watching it is just,
Mm,
pleasant,
yeah. Yep.
And because I was so young at that time and the story is quite serious, right? Like it
Yeah,
was
it
such
was
a love
serious.
story.
Yep.
Like sometimes like, oh what, like okay, like I can't even fathom the deepness of the love story there, but I still watch it because again, beautiful drawing.
Beautiful drawing, yeah.
The story itself is also unfolding quite good as well. It was very fantastical in a sense because she is Ceres or something like mystical creature or something like that.
Yep, true. And look, my fellow nerdy fans, if you're wondering why I've also watched that, again, I'll take you back to the part where this was for us the early 2000s, late 90s. You really didn't have much of a choice. Unlike here, I don't want this anime, gonna stream another anime. At that time, it's like, you know what? I'll just learn to like this. This is the only thing on TV. Don't really have much of a choice. That was the kind of stuff that we had. AXN was, for me, the channel was a godsend because it was dubbed in English, so I could understand it better. Again, although I'm Filipino, Glee and I are Cebuano, which means Tagalog is I'm not sure about Glee, but for me, it's not really a first language. It's more of a third language, in fact, right behind English and Cebuano.
Mhm.
So that's why AXN was such a godsend. And when they show this anime like Ayashino Ceres, Ghost Sweeper, which I do remember in terms of context and episode, these were the bomb. You didn't really like it, not your jam? Learn to make it your jam. That was how it was before. What about you, Glee?
Yeah, definitely. That's why if you watch these anime on the local channel, let's say the one that we're gonna talk about later on, at first you will not, understand it, but eventually you will learn to love it, and rightfully so. And what I wanted to talk about is, I don't know if we talk about this, Ghost Fighter, Yu Yu
Oh,
Hakusho.
Ghostfire.
Yeah.
Yu Yu Hakusho. So, yes, and this would be related now to what I'm going to speak on later. Of course, everybody was talking about Ghost Fighter back in the day. And honestly, I wasn't able to get into it because it was in ABS-CBN. It was dubbed
No,
in
wait,
Tagalog.
was it? I
It
thought it
was.
was
It was.
GMA.
GMA or ABS-CBN, one of those two.
Ah,
To be honest, see, when here's the thing, my fellow nerdy fans, and I'm not ashamed to say it. When I see that that anime is being dubbed in Tagalog, I don't watch it. It's just not because I have anything against a language. It's just not my language. I could barely at that time speak it. So you could imagine what my test course with Filipino looked like.
yeah, that's
Right?
what I wanted to ask. Like, how was your Filipino subject?
Atrocious. And somehow I stumbled through it. And again, I suppose I will admit to it as well. It was a bad student personality trait of mine. I barely gave any notice to things that I wasn't interested in. Tagalog being one of them. Math being probably a higher tier in terms of hatred, but you know. So look, it's not. Although I didn't watch Ghost Fighters, I am very much aware of its general premise: a tournament, a guy who uses his energy ray gun to fight against his enemies. And look, when I was playing my Game Boy, there was a Ghost Fighters video game, and of course I had that. And of course, looking at the characters themselves and with the character that I play on that game, I chose Vincent, your sword wielding black dragon shooting guy. Look, I can appreciate the anime, but during that time it just wasn't it. And guess what, Glee? That's also the same reason why I'm not 100% familiar, I would say, with Dragon Ball Z.
Ah, okay. Me, it's not about the language, but I don't know. Again, I think it was too much for me. Dragon Ball Z, Ghost
Mm,
Fighter. I was so into it. I remember when I was grade 6 in elementary school,
mm.
and you have a lot of projects back in the day,
Oh,
right? When
yeah.
you were elementary, I always draw at this as a side note, Eugene and those characters. And for just a side note, fellow nerdy fans, the names of the characters are not in Japanese
Mm.
when we
Yep.
watch them in our local television.
Yep.
So Eugene is the main character. I forgot the main character's name, and of course, Yu Yu Hakusho now has a live action, which is
Yep.
quite recent. So, but yeah, the what I remember is really those names that like
Yep.
Dennis, Vincent,
Alfred.
those Filipino version of the names.
Exactly. And again, because of how big they were, even with somebody like me, I knew those names, right? You tend to learn them. And look, there are quite a lot of people who'd like to pretend to be Taguro and just say his famous Filipino tagline, which is isang porsyentong lakas, which basically means 100% strength. You know that's how Taguro powers up, right? And that's a byline for a lot of people saying that they're that strong. It's like, okay, great for you. Good thing to aspire for, by the way. And while Glee was drawing Eugene, in our all boys school, it was always Goku, right? It's always the Dragon Ball Z characters, Vegeta, Piccolo. In fact, for me, look, again, I consider it a blessing whenever I get a chance to watch Dragon Ball Z in English because, again, apart from the fact that I can understand it, I love the characters. I love the strength. I love the power ups. No kid in the Philippines during my era could deny at least once, or no, more than once, more than 100 times in their childhood focusing their hands and shouting Kamehame wave at that time. We now know it's Kamehameha, but the English dub said it differently. And that is how powerful Dragon Ball Z is. Of course, I love Goku, but I think in video games, I prefer to play as Piccolo.
And speaking of those two anime, you've noticed that the shonen 90s anime always have this concept of tournament, right?
Yep.
That's a staple in shonen anime back in the day.
Oh, yeah. And again, yes, Ghost Fighters was a tournament. Dragon Ball Z had bunch of tournaments to deal with, all of which were fun. And then another anime that was also, I believe it was also 90s, and also about tournaments is Flame of Rekka.
Yes, I love Flame of Rekka.
Oh, that was awesome.
Where did you watch it then? You didn't watch it in... Really?
Oh, no, not ABS-CBN. Sorry, AXN. So it did
I watched it
there.
in GMA.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I think during that time, they came out right about the same time. But if I'm not mistaken, the GMA one was ahead by an episode or two. So my cousins always knew what episode was next because they watch on GMA and I watch on AXN. But it didn't matter. I still enjoyed I enjoyed the dragons. I won't say it here, but I suppose I can still name the dragons in order to properly summon them. And I remember that being explained like, if you want to summon them properly and use them, you have to summon them in the sequence of latest to earliest. Otherwise, if you don't follow that sequence, you're gonna end up hurting yourself.
Oh, really? I couldn't remember that part, but yeah, I really love Flame of Rekka. I love that he had to kind of like discover each dragon one at a time or two at a time or something like that.
Yeah.
And then on the tournament, he's not fully equipped yet, because he wasn't able to summon all of the dragons yet. So he was only limited to one at first and stuff like that. So it was really a testament of progress. And that's how I think the anime also helped shape my childhood, where you have to work hard and then you get progress. And it's really, again, getting too deep here, but anime is just really giving you that lesson, even though it's just from a violent perspective, but you kind of see they have to go to training, etc., and hard work.
Yep, I agree with you. And look, might be slightly different for me because I got those lessons or inculcated a lot of those lessons in my older years. In fact, I would say probably mid or after university. Because let's just say the way I was trained is you do well or you're grounded, basically. So my inspiration was I don't want to be grounded. But this anime wherein, there's progress, there's growth, I would say, and working hard to achieve it, maybe unconsciously, that's why we like these things. Because this is what we are taught. This is what we know must be done to progress in life. And we've seen it on the memes, we've seen it online, we've seen it with people. They view characters, Goku most especially, and I think he's been overused, as a role model of what it means to train harder to be better. And again, slightly deep, my fellow nerdy fans, but I'm sure you've seen some of those debate on Goku versus Superman. Newsflash, analysis has been made, Superman is of course stronger. But then they show a difference. Superman is technically a god, right? So much so that he's trying to be human. Goku, although a Super Saiyan, needs to train to be better, and he wants to be better. He wants to fight against better opponents to be a better version of himself. That is why people see him in a better light. That is why people, I would say, relate or use him as a role model more. So, my fellow nerdy fans, us aged-old nerds and geeks here, I'm proud of this. And, these old anime that we're presenting to you now is not just for the laughs and giggles. It helped shape Glee and I. Wouldn't you say so, Glee?
Definitely. It's really anime that really shaped my values. Because let's be honest here. Let's say how we were brought up as kids. Yep. It's not like the parents tell you like, oh, hard work is blah, blah, blah. You don't hear this from your parents.
No, not
So you
really.
just watch it from anime. You get it from anime, actually.
Yep, you do. From anime, from Disney, from movies, Hollywood, I suppose, but mostly from anime. And that's why I suppose, my fellow nerdy fans, I gravitate a lot towards RPGs in my video gaming, if I'm going to talk about video gaming a bit. Because in video gaming, it's about the growth of your character, it's about improving them, it's about that great story. And you project yourself sometimes in those things unconsciously, because that is what you also want to achieve for yourself. And look, not trying to sound bad here, but the way I see it, Glee and myself, we come here to different countries to be better, and we're slowly achieving our dreams. Probably she could say she's achieving hers already. I feel I'm achieving mine more than I did back in the Philippines, and I've spoken openly about that. And how we grew up with this anime, with our video games, shaped us to have this kind of mindset. And I'm really happy for that. Well,
Yes.
about you, Gridley, any other anime that you want to discuss from
Yes,
our time
I
honored
want
past?
to. I don't know if you watch it, Hunter x Hunter. We call it Hunter x Hunter in the Philippines,
Oh,
but
yes.
Hunter x Hunter. Yes, I really love this anime, and like the OVA, and I was so bummed that I think it wasn't really finished. I'm not sure if
Mm,
it's totally finished, but at that point before, it wasn't finished entirely. And the OVA, you don't know whether the main character Gon really was able to meet his father.
yep. And again, this was a time of anime that our main characters didn't know their father specifically, right? No, look, I haven't really followed Hunter x Hunter. Again, I think it was mostly because it was in
Tagalog.
dubbed in Tagalog. But at the same time, of course, my friends talk about it. We know that he's this uberly strong hunter. In fact, he was parodied a bit by One Punch Man, a more recent anime, with how he does his uppercut. And we've seen the videos of Gon. He is powerful if he lets go, you know? And speaking of that, of not being finished, yes, I did hear it that it wasn't, but they did remake it. There is
Oh
is
yeah,
there a new
yeah, they
one.
did
Yeah.
remake it, but I think that it was quite not super recent, but in the modern days.
Yep.
And I tried to watch it, but again, now as you've mentioned, we have a lot of choices in
Yep.
anime to watch that you would prefer watching things that of novelty, right? Because you've
Yep.
already watched the other one, but in saying that, I've actually watched recently Detective Conan.
Oh.
Yeah, because I love Detective Conan, and for the fellow nerdy fans who know me on this podcast, you know that I love my whodunit solving
Mm.
mystery detective types. And because Detective Conan is the longest running anime, maybe the same. I don't know how far off they are with One Piece,
Yep.
but because I haven't watched all of the episodes of Detective Conan, I'm still watching them now because there's not so much anime in this season that I really like to watch.
Yep. Yep. I get where you're coming from there. And look, the first time I read Detective Conan, I was extremely interested. I wanted to read more and more. But then, just like One Piece and to an extent Naruto, when you move past a certain number of chapters and episodes, and you're reaching the 100, 200 mark, it's like, man, I think you just need to quiet down a bit. It's like, it's it gets too much. And I felt that way with Detective Conan when I was like, how many episodes are there exactly now? It's like, they say, like, yeah, I think it's 1,000. It's like, nope, not doing that, you know?
But the good thing about Detective Conan than One Piece, because Detective Conan, each episode is a different story,
Mm,
although of course it's connected because he became a kid, right? But it's still really the whodunit part that you don't have to know or follow each episode. That's what I liked about it.
yep, yep. And good one on you for that. It's just that I've reached a point wherein, my limit is probably 24 episodes per season, and that's already long for me, right? You really have to get I suppose it's what we gamers call quality of life mode now. Plus, I'm getting in a little on in age, and I'd like to have that succinctness. I'd like to have that, that good storytelling. I don't mind 24 episodes and then you're coming out with another 24 episode season 2. Wink, wink, something like Dangers in My Heart or even Apothecary Diaries. Oh, I'm looking forward to those, But I like that part where I get captivated. But if you drag on too much, nah, that's when I stop. Do you feel that way, Glee, or is that
Yeah,
something that
yeah, I
you?
understand. I understand what you mean totally. And
Yep.
especially with all of the shows that we can watch today, like
Exactly.
you have too much choices that you'd rather, get on with it. And but going back to like a lot of episodes, I think Ray, you have also on your list Slam Dunk.
Yes, slam dunk. Now, in retrospect, I'm not sure if that was a 90s
Real?
anime.
Oh, okay.
Yep. However, look, fellow nerdy fans, I may suck at Tagalog, but I'm still Filipino, and I loved watching basketball as a kid. Still love to watch it now. And Slam Dunk for me is probably the best basketball anime out there, right? Better than Kuroko no Basket, which I think is just super powered teenagers playing basketball. Slam Dunk had more realism in them. And the latest Slam Dunk movie, honestly, it skips my mind the actual title, but the latest Slam Dunk movie is to me personally the best basketball animated movie of all time. Right? I was at on the edge of my seats on the last game sequence. That was just amazing storytelling, and that's why I love Slam Dunk. It's far more realistic in terms of basketball, but the characters are just amazing to relate to, amazing to hear about, amazing to talk about. And I could be wrong. It might actually be a 90s anime, but or not. But still, it deserves that special mention. Any special mentions for you, Glee?
I don't know if we need to mention, but of course, Rurouni Kenshin, like, need we say more, right?
Yep.
So we don't have to delve too much about it because it's the ultimate tier godlike anime. Well, I did have some like little anime that also kind of like very nostalgic, mainly catered to the female
Mm.
fellow nerdy fans, but maybe you would also know this, Ray. Of course, Sailor Moon,
Ah.
Cardcaptor Sakura, Ranma
Okay.
One Half.
Yes, yeah.
Ranma One Half, I heard they are doing a remake,
Remaking.
I think. Yeah.
Yes, it was like that, my fellow nerdy fans growing up. And again, I'm being pulled to memory lane here. So while the guys talked about Dragon Ball, the girls, whether from another school or those girls at heart in our own school, they loved Sailor Moon. That was their jam, and couldn't really relate for very obvious reasons. But maybe as an inkling to the type of guy that I would grow up to in terms of how I want to style myself, or my preferred style rather. I like tuxedo masks get up because, formal, pristine. I'm like, yeah, no nonsense. I like that. Plus the mask. Who doesn't like that?
Uh,
What about you, Glee? Do you think tuxedo mask is a little too formal for your taste and Usagi should have gone for somebody else?
I didn't really think back because at that point when I was watching Sailor Moon, this was like the very early versions. As you know,
Mm,
there are a lot of versions of Sailor
yep.
Moon, which I didn't watch anymore. But I was watching Sailor Moon when I was super young, so I didn't really think about tuxedo mask. I was just into the girls, like
Yep.
so yeah. At that point, not really, but I don't know. Like, I don't have any strong opinions about tuxedo mask.
So my fellow nerdy fans, even as kids, at least for guys like myself, we already had opinions, right? So even if we didn't watch Sailor Moon, and mind you, we were what, 8, 9 years old at this time, they were still pretty anime girls. So we're still like, why the hell not? But of course, if we had to do a tier list, Dragon Ball Z is still on top, and we probably wouldn't put Sailor Moon on that tier list. But still, we know those names because they transcend time. Cardcaptor Sakura. I didn't watch it because obviously it was geared towards girls. But even that was big news all the time. There was I don't think it was a remake, but a sequel recently that was made for Cardcaptor Sakura. And a lot of the anime community was like, we want our Clo cards again. What about you, Glee? Did you watch the sequel?
No, I didn't. Again, I guess at that point in time, I was maybe too old for that. But it really just depends. I have to say, right? It depends whether on the anime and how it has that potential to pull my heartstrings in terms of whether I'm too old for it or not. Because, of course, if I watch, I don't know, like Rurouni now, I would still love it. If
Mm.
I would watch Detective Conan, of course, I would still love it. So it just really would depend on the anime.
But look, also with that way of saying like whether we'd like it now or whatnot, just a little bit of an idea for our fellow nerdy fans. It's a bit of wisdom. My parents, specifically my mom, gifted me. Boys and girls, yep, we do mature. We do mature, but boys never grow up. So I would still if you told me Fushigi Yuugi came out, I would still do that. When the new Power Rangers movie, the one where the older Power Rangers were doing their stuff, came out, I watched that on Netflix. I loved it. I know production wise and whatnot, it's probably a 6 out of 10 movie if I'm just being serious. But if again, I'm segueing it a little bit here. Power Rangers to me, that movie, sure, critics, you can say it's a 6 out of 10. To me, it's priceless. It was beautiful. And I don't want
Oh,
it any other way. That was an amazing movie for me.
oh, is
Maybe
it
it's
on Netflix?
it is on Netflix. You can tell me it's nostalgia glasses. That was again once a ranger, not the remake one. It's Power Rangers Once a Ranger. Again, nostalgia glasses. Accuse me of that? Sure. It was amazing and I love it more. It's 100 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, yeah, I love Power Rangers. I remember as well
Yep.
before, like, of course, we're segueing because this is not anime, right? But
Yep.
I wonder, I think it would have also been based on an anime, I think. I'm not too sure.
No. So
No?
Power Rangers is not based on an anime, but it is based on the Super Sentai series in Japan, which has been around since, if I'm not mistaken, the 70s,
Uh-huh.
probably earlier. Not entirely sure. And if you're gonna watch the old Power Rangers series, and even some of its more recent incarnations, a lot of the scenes were from those 70s, 80s Super Sentai series. I even remember one of the one of the episodes wherein they couldn't make the proper change to the scene because it's from the Japanese one. So the name on their morphers was in relation to the Japanese series. So it's like, oh, Zeo Ranger, what's that?
Ah.
ZYU. So not the Zeo, the Zeo. Like, what's that? So it's based on Japanese sales. See? The Japanese has given us a lot to be happy about.
But there is also a Power Rangers American version, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's
So
what I watch, I think. Not
yep,
the
that's
Japanese.
what we
Ah,
watch.
okay, yeah,
So
yeah.
the Power Rangers that we know and love were done by American actors in terms of their live sequencing interaction. But a lot of the action and fight scene, especially the mech scenes, were from those old
Ah.
Sentai series. I suppose it saved them money. And if you read more about Power Rangers, especially in its early days, you might not be too happy on how the actors were treated, but that's a discussion for another time.
Oh, I remember this is again a nostalgia moment. So I remember I was first grade when I was also into Power Rangers, and I of course I chose the Ranger. And back in that day, so I was very early in school. I still remember this, maybe 7 a.m. or something, and no one was on the in the hallway. So I was doing this
Yep,
Power Ranger
yep.
moves. Then when I
Everybody did.
did that, I hit a nun because I was in a Catholic school at that time. I hit the nun, and that was, I think, one of my first time, like a detention kind of thing. And she was so mad at me, but yeah, that's why, again, I don't want to talk about too much about this religion here, but you would think that she would be considerate to a child, right? Because who would know that she would be coming and I didn't see her?
My fellow nerdy fans, again, a reminder to all of us the 90s were a different era. Wonderful, but a different era, okay? So right now, the nun would probably laugh at it and just tell Glee to be careful. At that time, you get detention. That was common, so not an issue. And of course, understandable. Glee was the Pink Ranger, and no guy would no guy would deny at my age that Amy Jo Johnson, the one who played Kimberly Hart, was probably one of our first celebrity crushes. You know, she was beautiful. That being said, I also like. Here's the thing: I like the Green Ranger because it was a new color. We at that time we liked these new things. You know, like he was a bad guy first and then became a good guy, but then Dragon Zord. What kid wouldn't want to have a Zord called the Dragon Zord, right? Eventually evolving to the White Ranger and whatnot. It was an amazing time, right? And we had that. Eventually, that drove our love for other geeky stuff, led to more video gaming, led to anime. The anime that we have spoken about for the last 50 minutes or so, I would say. And, all these things in our childhood of what we are sharing to you, my fellow nerdy fans, especially if there are some of you out there that are slightly younger than us. This is what we grew up with. This is where we got our love for the stuff that we do. And not only does it give us fun, doesn't give us the laughter and maybe in some cases the tears, it helped drive how we proceed with our lives, right, Glee? We fight. I suppose we fight for a better tomorrow or for better lives for ourselves because our heroes in yesteryears did the same thing. We want to do more than just the main quest because that's what we played with. Oh, that's what we play with in our Final Fantasies and Dragon Quest and whatnot. And that's what we saw from heroes like Goku, Kenshin, and Tamahome to do more than what is asked of us. I don't know, Glee, do you share those thoughts as well?
Definitely, Ray, definitely. And the anime has really one of the biggest impacts on my whole values, persona, etc.
Yep.
But yeah, so I couldn't have said more.
That is true. That is true. And especially for me, I think, since I am a bid writer by trade, and I'd like to say I'm a writer by trade, these great stories from all of this anime, Disney, Power Rangers, and video games, that probably helps fuel or started a fire as well on why I'm here today as a bid writer. And I am very happy for it. And you know what? Not an incentive, but how I want to move forward in my life is to continue to focus on that happiness, to be able to share that not just with you, my fellow nerdy fans, but even with the younger generation, like my nephew or my nephews back in the Philippines. It's something that I want to keep pushing forward for those positive values. That being said, that is why I'm slightly disappointed with some anime right now, which is not really. With just one look at the trailer, you already know you're not going for it, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. That's why I've been watching Detective Conan, right?
Yep.
But of course, I think there is some of the anime that Ray have mentioned to me, and we might cover that on our next episodes, in the next upcoming episodes. And we have also some new summer anime lineup, so which we can talk about next. But before that, fellow nerdy fans, is there anything on your list that you would like to share with us, which really helped shape your childhood, give you that nostalgia vibes? Please let us know in the comments down below.
Right. And with that, thank you once again, my fellow nerdy fans, for joining us here today. This has been an amazing episode to talk to you about. Again, anime was with us from childhood. All this nerdy stuff from Power Rangers to video games was there from childhood. And contrary to what more close-minded people might say, it shaped us positively in many ways.
Yes, and fellow nerdy fans, if you like this episode, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a review or rate us on your favorite podcasting platforms on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It will definitely help the podcast a lot. And of course, please share to your friends.
All right. Once again, I'm Ray.
And my name is Glee, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
I have to say, Demon Slayer, okay? I really tried to watch it for some reason my mind just goes somewhere else. I'm so
Ah,
sorry. I'm so sorry for the Demon Slayer fans. I tried.
I know. That's me.